Hello, and my name is Richard Haight, and today I'd like to answer a question about sexuality. Sexuality regarding sex in regard to the spiritual awakening path. And so the question is from a Chris, and let's see. It says, this topic has been weighing on my mind for quite some time. I've learned that karmic energy blocks us in a way to move forward in the spiritual path. I'm not in any relationship right now, but there are still natural sexual urges to want to connect with someone emotionally and physically. I've also seen two schools of thought regarding this. The first being one should be ascetic and practice celibacy to avoid any unnecessary karmic energy one might take on from a partner. The other is that if one is fit, healthy, and willing, then one shouldn't withhold sex from another willing party, and that creates bad karma. I'm assuming it means that because that creates bad karma. Chris, feel free to correct me if I am wrong on my assumption there of what you meant. So I'm guessing that you mean that withholding sex from someone who would like you to have sex with them would create bad karma. I would like to hear your thoughts for this. Secondly, should one choose to be an ascetic, do you recommend any specific practices to transmute sexual energy into spiritual energy? Thirdly, on the topic of chakras, I've heard it's a huge focal point to focus on the clear blockages and focus on any limiting beliefs, obstacles in the path of spirituality. Do you think it's necessary to focus on this aspect? And if so, do you have any practices to balance the chakras? Thank you for your time and your amazing content. Well, thank you, Chris, for enjoying the content. There's a lot here, so I'm going to see if I can't just sort of break it down and address one issue at a time. Regarding sexuality, people put much more, people empower sexuality much more than it needs to be. This is something that I actually had thought, I'd heard from people and probably read some book somewhere that that one needed to be celibate to be spiritually awakened, that one should not engage in spiritual or in sexuality or that sort of thing. And I spent years repressing that sort of energy, and it was extremely, extremely unhealthy. It will create such a compulsion, such urges as to be overwhelming. And that, of course, is it's like trying to starve yourself to awaken. You're just damaging the body, and eventually you will have such a ravenous hunger that it will be almost impossible to control. Now, in my case, I realized this before it ended up causing any big problems, but and then I discarded that entirely. But fundamentally, there's an assumption behind the approach of celibacy, that, first of all, that there is anything that is not spirit. There's something that is not spiritual energy, and there is something that is spiritual energy. So that already is a duality, as if there's anything other than what is. What I mean by that is anything that is transcendent, anything that will truly be satisfying for you is all that is. There is a hunger within you that can never be satisfied until the revelation of all that is within you and all around is experienced. And what is it that prevents us from experiencing that? It is the way that the mind functions to divide things up into what is divine and what is not divine, what is special and what is not special, what is high, what is low, what is far, what is near, what is you and what is me. It's a feeling of separation. What I will say regarding sexual energy, and this is true about most anything, early on in the path, effectively we are a follower of atmospheres, which means that the awakening process is still so delicate within. We're still so caught up in mind and so caught up in mental noise, so caught up in our inner demons and the atmospheres that they create, that we're truly delicate. And the most powerful detrimental thing around us will be the people who are around us who are pulling us down. The most powerful beneficial thing at that time might be the people around us who are essentially pulling us up by their atmospheric field. When I was young, I was suicidal and I was drinking and drugging. I had no one around me that was positive. So I had to separate myself about 6 months. Might have been as much as a year, but I don't have a clear memory of the time, but somewhere between 6 months and a year, where I couldn't be around any of them. I couldn't be around anybody. I just needed to get my bearings. And so that was sort of an ascetic time. And an ascetic time is appropriate when it's appropriate. See, the desire is to have, and this is a common desire, it was a desire that I had, is that we were given some template through which we just act in life. We become like robots. If we do X, Y, and Z, we'll awaken. And if we, you know what I mean? If we abstain from sex and we pray, we'll awaken. And, or if we have sex with everybody, we won't develop karma issues and we'll awaken. That's just like it's a template. That's mind stuff, completely mind stuff. Just toss it out entirely. Don't pay any attention to that. There's some elements of, and this is why it's seductive, there's some elements of truth in all of this. And so it sort of gets confusing. The elements of truth is, yes, as I talked about, the atmosphere around us is very, very much affects our atmosphere. And so therefore, having sex casually, you're bringing on atmospheres in very close proximity internally that can and do affect you in very negative ways. And sexuality, just like everything in life, is not to be done flippantly. So you're not obligated by any means to have sex with anybody. Nor is there a necessity to avoid sex entirely. There will be a time to eat and a time to drink, and there will be a time for sexual interaction. Person on the awakening path, the sexual interaction probably is much more about intimacy, about revealing deeply authentic intimacy with another. It's not just about having an orgasm. It's not just about entertainment. It may not include having an orgasm at all. What I've realized is that it's not worth much of my time overly concerning about sexuality, other than to say, be careful, be aware, feel your way through what is right and what is not for you. From a soul level, I don't mean from just like an urges, compulsions level, like a selfish level. I don't mean that. When I say you, I'm referring to the deepest, most fundamental you, the transcendent, the Godhead, so to speak. All of those words, of course, are inherently false, because whatever it is I'm talking about can't be defined. But it's the most fundamental thing. When all else is stripped away, that is revealed. And if you start feeling your way through life, and this will be a practice, about what is in tune with that and what is not, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen, but it's a refining process. So it takes a little courage early on to go through that refining process. But as we go through that refining process, there becomes more clarity. And then clarity takes on the process, and it takes less courage, because when we have clarity, there's no need for courage. But early on, it will take a certain amount of courage to live one's life without templates. And so the karmic sex that can bring about awakening, that's one extreme. The complete abstinence of sex is another extreme, and both of these lead to profound levels of suffering. I've worked with a number of people that partook in what would be described as sexual healings, married couples, which means they're having sex with other people, and it's treated as if it was a spiritual thing to cleanse their energy fields and their chakras and that sort of thing. And invariably, it leads to, almost invariably, it leads to more marital trouble. Sex shouldn't be treated too lightly. Be like a warrior in enemy territory. You don't want to stand out, but you want to be aware. In enemy territory, you want to appear as the masses, but you also need to be aware, vibrantly aware. In order to stand out and not be seen as the masses, one needs to be able to relax into awareness. We relax into awareness through our lives. That includes the sexual life. In my own process, I found that my desire for sexuality has waned tremendously through my own awakening process. But it's a complete it's more like an effect. It's not a cause. If you try to reverse that, where you cut off sexuality early, you're not yet matured into the process, and you're willfully doing something that is very unnatural, and that will create suffering. It's like trying to take an 8-year-old and teach them about sexuality, about sex. They're just not ready for that necessarily. They're not necessarily going to. They might be able to sort of accept it, but they're not going to get the feeling. It's like trying to explain love to an 8-year-old. The love that you have for your wife. They're not going to understand it. They just haven't developed the capacity to understand what true, what that kind of love is. Not true love, but what people call true love. Romantic love is. They just don't. They just may not have the capacity yet. So just be authentic in your spiritual awakening process from where you are, and move forward from where you are, and allow the rest to be an effect, not a cause. Don't be too willful in this process. Let's see. So that is addressing sexuality. Ascetics. Again, there will be times in one's life when one may need to withdraw, when one may need to spend concentrated time alone, when one may need to spend concentrated time in meditation, when one may need to fast. And there will be other times of activity. This is natural. This is the way it would naturally occur. And you'll feel your way through that process. But be very wary of when teachers take that natural process, find an aspect of it, and then turn it into an ideology that that's the way you should live your life. You should live in a cave. I've worked with a number of people who've done this, who've given up everything and moved out into the forest in order to be one with all that is and not be distracted. They're the most distracted people I've met on the path of spirituality. They're utterly captured by the attempt to avoid the world. So instead of spending the time in meditation, which they said they wanted to do, they spend their time, cleaning up their house, chopping wood, whatever, all these other things that they themselves admit were distractions. They're not, it's like compulsively urgingly done. And they never get to what they wanted to get to, which is that space of clear, vibrant silence. And they're full of anxiety. These urges to become ascetic oftentimes are a result of fear, oftentimes a result of trauma, of a trauma in the world. And so we go into a fight, flight, avoidance that then gets put into the nice, noble narrative of being a spiritual ascetic, and we become a nun, or we become a monk, or we become an ascetic. And it makes it sound beautiful, but it's taken something ugly, that suffering that we may have gone through that's undigested. Maybe the rejection, or maybe the rape, maybe who knows what it could be. And it's taken that ugliness and then just smeared it all over the label of spirituality as well. It's ego. And that's not a judgment against the individual. That's just what's happened. We all may want to appear noble. We need to give that up. Let's see. But, you don't have to give it up right now. Chakras. So there are many traditions where certain points on the body are prioritized versus other points on the body. And I don't want to get into a debate about whether there are or are not chakras. To me, it's utterly irrelevant. Spiritual awakening fundamentally is the recognition that you cannot be any more or less spiritual than you already are. There truly is no other. There is only this one field, ultimately. And it is the way that we perceive, and the way that the mind is biased, and the assumptions that are built in of a sense of self and other that create the feeling of separation. And that creates the feeling that we are more or less spiritual than somebody else. But if you get underneath all of that mind stuff, you find there's this point of commonality that is everywhere. And that is spirituality. That's the most fundamental you. It has nothing to do with your name or anything that you ever thought you were. It is undefinable, ultimately. And when you look at it from that perspective, and then you think, oh, I need to go through chakras and all that, it starts to become utter nonsense. Hooey. Put your mind on the most fundamental, and the body balances out on its own in that sense. The idea that you have to go through one point, then another point, then another point, then another point to open up, you're welcome to do that. It's not necessary, though. Or it may be necessary until you realize it's no longer necessary, which is kind of like saying, if you want to use drugs, there's nothing I can do to stop you. You're going to use drugs until you realize that they haven't necessarily done for you what you hoped that they would do, and so then you move on. But that lesson was necessary for you. That lesson may have been necessary for you to give something up. So I don't want to say, don't play with chakras or anything like that. It's your spiritual path. It's your life. Do what you wish. But most fundamentally, all these things, these specific ideologies and concepts will be given up at some point. We will recognize they are no longer necessary, and they will be given up. So I guess that's about all I can say on that, and not be overly redundant. I hope this helps in some small way, Chris, and to anybody else. And of course, I mean no offense against any particular religious concept, but the reality is Religions have developed from mind. They may have been inspired by an individual long ago that was awakened. But most of what is written, maybe all of what is written, was not written by that individual. They were written by other people who heard that individual through their filters of mind, through their ideologies. That's why you get countless different types of Buddhism, countless different types of Christianity, countless different approaches to Taoism, it's because what you're getting is not the most fundamental thing. You're not getting the original. You're getting offshoots, and everybody's offshoots to them are the original. Everybody says, I'm teaching the true, authentic thing. Everybody else is wrong, but I'm right. Let's just go to the heart of the essential, most fundamental thing. You're not going to get there through techniques, through mind. Some practices that are very helpful, meditation. So I teach meditation in my book, The Unbound Soul, and also my other book, Experience Meditation Unbound, is entirely about meditation and how it can be used as a path to discover the most fundamental. The Unbound Soul is a combination of teachings about the fundamental, but also understanding the mind, because the mind is the great deceiver. That's what you're essentially blinded by. And so it's very important to understand the essence of mind, the nature of mind, and how it has blocked you from awareness of the most fundamental. So with that, I will be saying have a good day. Thank you so much for your question, Chris, and I hope this helps. Take care. Bye-bye.